The alien armada arrived not with thunder, but silence. It was a vast, dark constellation of warships that swallowed the stars in their wake. They had been coming for decades, detected first as faint anomalies in deep space, then as unmistakable threats on humanity's most powerful telescopes. The world watched them approach, growing larger with each passing year, and no one knew what to do. There were no messages, no demands, no signs of life aboard those ships. Only cold, calculated movement toward Earth. By the time they reached the edge of the solar system, humanity had mobilized every defense it could scrape together. Nations set aside centuries-old rivalries, pooling resources into a final stand. Orbital platforms bristling with plasma cannons lined Earth's skies. Automated drone fleets patrolled the void. Shield generators hummed beneath the surface, ready to activate at a moment's notice. Every major city had evacuation plans. Governments issued calm, rehearsed statements while behind closed doors, panic reigned. But when the enemy struck, none of it mattered. The first wave hit the outer defenses like a hammer through glass. Lasers brighter than the sun carved through satellites and battle stations, reducing them to molten slag before they could fire a single shot. The drones never stood a chance, hacked, disabled, or torn apart by weapons far beyond human understanding. The planetary shield flickered once, then failed entirely. Within hours, Earth's orbital perimeter was in ruins. The cities below fared no better. Gravity pulses rippled through the atmosphere, toppling buildings and cracking continents. EMP bursts fried electronics from pole to pole. Entire nations lost contact with their military command centers in seconds. What followed was chaos. Millions fled underground bunkers. Others ran blindly through streets already burning. Governments collapsed under the weight of impossible decisions. Military leaders gave orders no one could follow. There was no strategy, no countermeasure, no miracle waiting in the wings. And then came the dropships. They fell from the sky like black rain, piercing the clouds with silent precision. They landed where the damage was worst, deploying legions of sleek, insect-like machines that moved with terrifying efficiency. Cities became graveyards overnight. Resistance was crushed without hesitation. Soldiers who fought back vanished in bursts of violet light. Civilians who tried to flee were caught in energy nets and dragged away, no one knew where. As the days passed, the truth became undeniable. Earth was losing. In the heart of what remained of global command, a desperate meeting unfolded. Generals, scientists, diplomats, all gathered in a reinforced bunker buried beneath the Himalayas. Outside, the world burned. Inside, they argued over what little hope remained. One name kept surfacing: Project Arkwright. It wasn't a weapon. Not exactly. It was an experimental vessel, built in secrecy for deep space exploration, not war. Its mission had always been peaceful: to reach distant stars, to seek out new life, to expand humanity's reach beyond the cradle of Earth. But now, with the planet falling apart, its purpose had changed. There were no other ships, no second chances, only Arkwright. The crew selection began immediately. Commanders, pilots, engineers, linguists, those with the skills needed for the unknown. Some volunteered, others were chosen. All understood the risk. The ship would be leaving behind a dying world, heading straight into the heart of the enemy's domain. If there was any chance of turning this war around, it wouldn't come from Earth. It would come from a single ship and the few brave souls aboard it. Final preparations took mere hours. The launch site, hidden beneath layers of false intelligence, remained untouched by the invasion. As the crew boarded, the last remaining officials saluted them, not as soldiers, but as the final hope of a species on the brink. The countdown began. Outside, the sky was dark with smoke and ash. Cities smoldered, oceans boiled. Billions were dead or dying. Inside the cockpit of Arkwright, Captain Elias Rourke took his seat. His hands trembled slightly as he gripped the controls. He looked at the faces around him, his crew, his team, the last of Earth's best. He exhaled slowly. Engage launch sequence. The engines roared to life. Earth fell away beneath them. Behind them, a war raged. Ahead, only silence. The silence after launch was heavier than gravity. Inside Arkwright, The hum of life support systems and the soft glow of control panels were the only signs that anything still functioned. Outside, Earth had vanished behind them, swallowed by smoke and fire. There was no looking back. Captain Elias Rourke sat in the command chair, eyes fixed on the forward display. The stars stretched endlessly before them, cold, distant, indifferent. He didn't speak. No one did. They had left the dying world behind with nothing but a mission and a sliver of hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, this single ship could do what entire armies couldn't. They ran silent. No transmissions, no external scans unless absolutely necessary. Every signal risked detection, and they couldn't afford to be found. Not yet. The alien fleet's movements were erratic but predictable. They had established orbital dominance around Earth, but their presence beyond that was sparse. That meant one thing: their supply lines were vulnerable. The plan wasn't a fight. It was to learn. Dr. Mira Solano, the mission's lead linguist, worked tirelessly in the research bay, feeding intercepted alien signals into the ship's AI. She had spent years studying fragments of extraterrestrial communication recovered from long-dead probes. Now, she had real data, raw, unfiltered transmissions pulsing through space like whispers in the dark. "It's not a language," she muttered one night, rubbing her tired eyes. "It's more like instinct." Across from her, Lieutenant Dax Venn leaned over the console. "Explain that." She tapped a few keys, pulling up waveforms on the screen. "There's no syntax, no structure we can recognize. It's layered, like multiple messages stacked on top of each other. They're not just speaking, they're transmitting intent, emotion, even memory." Venn frowned. "So, it's not just communication, it's shared experience." "Exactly," Solano said. "This isn't how humans talk. This is how an entire species thinks together." The implication sent a chill through the crew. If the aliens communicated like this, then individuality, as humanity understood it, might not exist among them. They weren't conquering planets out of greed or malice. They were acting as a singular mind, one that saw Earth as something necessary, not something to be destroyed for sport. But why? What made Earth so vital? The answer came slowly, piece by piece, stitched together from salvage logs, decrypted transmissions, and the wreckage of derelict alien vessels drifting through deep space. The first clue came when Arkwright passed through a dead system, an entire solar array abandoned, its planets scorched and lifeless. There were no bodies, no signs of battle, just silence. But buried beneath layers of encrypted data in a wrecked command module, Solano found a warning. Earth is habitable. Earth is viable. Earth is our last option. That was all. No explanation. No history. Just desperation. Further scans revealed more. Other worlds, once teeming with life, now barren. Not destroyed by war, but stripped bare. Resources drained, atmospheres poisoned, ecosystems collapsed. These weren't conquerors. They were survivors. And Earth was their final refuge. Rourke read the report in silence, his fingers tightening around the edge of the console. He had expected monsters. Instead, he found ghosts. He gathered the crew in the central chamber, dimly lit by emergency lighting. Faces worn with exhaustion stared back at him. "We've been fighting an extinction event," he said. "Not a war." A heavy pause followed. "They don't want Earth because it's ours," Rourke continued. "They need it because theirs is gone." Venn exhaled sharply. "You're saying they're refugees?" Solano nodded. "More than that. They're running out of time." Silence settled over the room like dust. Then Engineer Kale spoke up. "If they're desperate enough to take another planet, what happens when they realize we won't give it up?" No one had an answer. What followed was the hardest part. Not action, not combat, but decision-making. The original mission had been simple: gather intelligence, return if possible. But now, with the truth laid bare, staying the course felt wrong. They couldn't keep running. They couldn't keep hiding. They had to make contact. But how? The aliens didn't communicate like humans. They didn't negotiate. Their actions were precise, coordinated, absolute. There was no diplomacy, only necessity. And necessity had already declared Earth theirs. Still, there had to be a way. Solano proposed using the same layered transmission method they had deciphered. "We can mimic their signal," she explained. "Not just send words, we can project thought, intention, memory." It was insane, dangerous, but it was also the only shot they had. Rourke gave the order. The next phase began. They charted a course toward the enemy's core systems, threading through asteroid fields and cloak zones where patrols were weakest. They avoided direct confrontation, slipping through gaps in the alien defenses like shadows. Every maneuver was calculated. Every second counted. Days turned into weeks. Food rations dwindled. Sleep became a luxury. Tensions rose. Tempers flared. But no one quit. No one backed down. And then, finally, they arrived. The alien capital world loomed ahead. A massive, artificial construct orbiting a dying sun. A labyrinth of megastructures, energy conduits, and floating cities stretched across space like a living organism. It pulsed with activity, with movement, with purpose. They were close. Too close. The moment Arkwright entered the outer perimeter, alarms blared. They had been detected. Every eye turned to Rourke. He stood, gripping the armrest of his seat. "This is it," he said. "Time to find out if we're still human enough to matter." The signal was transmitted. Silence followed. Then movement. A single alien vessel detached from the swarm and approached, unarmed, alone. The response had come. Now, they had to decide what to do next. The alien ship drifted toward them like a shadow against the dying light of its sun. No weapons, no aggressive maneuvers, just silent, deliberate motion. It was smaller than Arkwright, sleek and angular, with surfaces that shimmered like liquid metal. Every part of it seemed alive, shifting subtly as if responding to something unseen. Inside Arkwright, tension gripped the crew like gravity. No one spoke. Even the hum of the life support systems felt intrusive in the silence. Captain Elias Rourke sat rigid in his command chair, eyes locked on the approaching vessel. His fingers hovered over controls, though there was nothing more he could do now. The signal had been sent. The response had come. There was no turning back. Dr. Mira Solano stood beside the main console, her hands trembling slightly as she reviewed the final adjustments to the transmission protocol. She had spent days encoding human thought into alien structure, layering intention, memory, and emotion into a single broadcast. If this worked, they wouldn't just be speaking, they would be sharing. If it failed, they would be erased. "They're hailing us," Lieutenant Dax Venn said, voice tight, but not through standard comms. Solano exhaled sharply. "Of course not." She tapped a few keys, rerouting the incoming signal through the modified AI interface. The screen flickered once, then filled with cascading symbols, patterns of meaning layered so deeply that even the most advanced translation software struggled to parse them. But Solano didn't need translation. She needed understanding. The moment the signal connected, the room changed. Not physically, not visually, but emotionally. A presence pressed against their minds. Not invasive, not violent, but immense. It wasn't words. It wasn't speech. It was awareness. The aliens were listening. And for the first time, they weren't attacking. Rourke straightened. "We show them who we are. Everything. Our history, our survival, our desperation." Solano nodded and activated the transmission. It wasn't a message. It was a flood. Humanity's story unfolded in waves. Images of Earth before the war, of cities teeming with life, of oceans stretching endlessly under blue skies. Then came the war itself, the burning cities, the collapsing governments, the millions lost. And beneath it all, the raw, unfiltered truth. Fear, pain, hope, defiance. Then came the question, why did they come? The answer arrived instantly, not in words, but in sensation. A world dying, ecosystems collapsing, generations starving, a species driven beyond the edge of extinction, searching desperately for a new home. They had seen Earth from afar, watched its biosphere thrive while their own crumbled. To them, it was not conquest. It was survival, a shared fate. Rourke felt his breath catch. He looked at Solano, saw the same realization dawning in her eyes. They weren't monsters. They were mirrors. Venn shifted uneasily. If they see us as equals, what does that mean for Earth? Solano whispered, "It means we have a chance." The alien ship responded. Its hull rippled, and suddenly, a projection formed in front of Arkwright, a massive construct of light and data, pulsing in rhythmic patterns. It wasn't just communication. It was invitation. They wanted to show something in return. Rourke hesitated only briefly before giving the order. "Let them in." The ship's systems adjusted automatically, allowing the alien consciousness to interface directly with Arkwright. The sensation was overwhelming. It wasn't just information being exchanged. It was experience, memory, emotion. For a brief moment, every person aboard Arkwright felt what it meant to be alien, to live as a collective, to feel the weight of an entire species' survival pressing down on every action, every decision. And then clarity. They saw themselves through alien eyes, not as enemies, not as obstacles, but as another civilization clinging to existence. Another species fighting to survive in a universe that gave no guarantees. For the first time since the invasion began, the possibility of peace felt real. Solano turned to Rourke, her voice barely above a whisper. "We can negotiate." He nodded slowly. "Then let's end this war." The next hours passed in a blur of complex exchanges. The aliens transmitted vast amounts of data, maps of their core worlds, records of their decline, projections of their future. In return, Arkwright shared everything humanity had: scientific knowledge, medical advancements, environmental strategies. The aliens absorbed it all, processing it at speeds beyond human comprehension. And then came the final offer. A choice. Earth could remain under human control, but with strict limitations. The aliens would establish controlled zones, monitor resource usage, ensure long-term sustainability. In exchange, they would share their technology, their knowledge, their survival strategies. Humanity would not be conquered, but it would no longer be alone. It was not a perfect solution, but it was a solution. Rourke turned to his crew. "This is it. This is what we came for." Van clenched his jaw. "Are we sure this isn't just another way of taking what they want?" Solano met his gaze. "It's not about taking anymore. It's about surviving together." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Rourke spoke. "We accept." The moment the agreement was finalized, the alien ship withdrew. The swarm surrounding Arkwright dispersed. The signal ceased. The connection was severed. Inside Arkwright, the crew sat in stunned silence. It was done. Now they had to go home. The journey back was quiet. No alarms, no threats, no desperate maneuvers. Just a steady hum of engines pushing them toward a planet forever changed. As Earth loomed closer, Rourke stared out at the scarred surface below. Billions had died. Cities had burned. Governments had fallen. And yet, here they were. One ship, one mission, and a war that never needed to happen. He turned to his crew. "We bring them the truth," he said. "No lies, no propaganda, just the facts." They nodded, because the hardest part wasn't convincing the aliens. It was convincing humanity. That peace was possible. Earth was not the same when Arkwright returned. The sky still bore the scars of war, burned-out satellites drifting in silent orbits, shattered cities smoldering beneath layers of ash. The alien fleet had withdrawn from direct combat, but its presence remained, a distant, watchful force hovering at the edges of Earth's atmosphere. They were waiting, watching to see if humanity would honor the fragile peace that had been brokered across the void. As Arkwright descended through the upper atmosphere, Captain Elias Rourke stared out the viewport, watching the world below come into focus. What once felt like home now felt uncertain, caught between survival and surrender, between fear and understanding. Billions had died. Billions more lived in ruins, clinging to what little remained. And yet, here they were, not with weapons, not with conquest, but with truth. The landing site was in what used to be northern Canada, deep within a fortified bunker buried beneath layers of ice and secrecy. It was one of the few places untouched by the invasion, one of the last strongholds of human resistance. As the ship touched down, the crew sat in silence, bracing themselves for what came next. They stepped out into a world on the brink. The remaining governments, fragmented, desperate, and leaderless, had gathered in this last refuge. Scientists, generals, diplomats, survivors, all trapped in a cycle of grief and rage, unwilling to believe that the war could end without fire and bloodshed. When word spread that Arkwright had returned, that the impossible had happened, disbelief turned to anger. Rourke stood before them, flanked by Dr. Mira Solano, Lieutenant Dax Van, and the rest of the crew. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His words carried the weight of everything they had seen, everything they had learned. "We went to their world," he said. "We saw who they are. They're not monsters. They're not conquerors. They're survivors, just like us." A general slammed his fist on the table. "You expect us to believe that? After what they did to our planet?" Solano stepped forward. "We understand the pain. We lost people too, but we also saw something else, something you haven't been shown." She tapped her wrist, activating a projection. The room filled with images, alien cities crumbling under the weight of environmental collapse, entire planets stripped bare, civilizations erased by time and desperation. They didn't come here for war. They came here because they had nowhere else to go. Silence followed, then murmurs, then questions. Ven took over. We made contact. We communicated, not with weapons, not with threats, but with understanding. And they responded, not as enemies, but as equals. A scientist, eyes red from exhaustion, spoke up. "And what do they want in return?" Rourke met his gaze. "Coexistence, controlled zones, resource management. In exchange, they give us technology, medical advancements, energy solutions, environmental restoration. We don't lose Earth. We share it. Together." The room erupted in debate. Some called it treason. Others saw it as salvation. Accusations flew. Fear ruled the moment. But slowly, inevitably, reason crept in, because the alternative was simple. Keep fighting, until there was nothing left to fight for. Over the following weeks, the truth spread, not just among leaders, but among the people, survivors in underground shelters, soldiers in ruined bases, families clinging to hope in the wreckage of their homes. The story of Arkwright became legend, not a conquest, not a victory, but a choice. And choice, in the end, was all they had. Negotiations began in earnest. A new council formed, composed of both human and alien representatives. Communication remained difficult, but progress was made. Understanding grew. Slowly, cautiously, trust began to take root. Humanity was no longer alone. And for the first time since the alien armada arrived, the future was not written in fire. In the months that followed, Earth began to heal. Alien technology accelerated recovery efforts, cleaning poisoned air, restoring water supplies, rebuilding infrastructure. Medical breakthroughs eradicated diseases that had plagued humanity for centuries. Energy grids were restructured using alien fusion cores, making power abundant and sustainable. The scars of war remained, but so did the promise of renewal. Arkwright itself became a symbol, no longer just a ship, but an idea, proof that even in the darkest moments, diplomacy could triumph over destruction, that intelligence could outweigh instinct, that one vessel, sent into the unknown, could change the fate of a species. Captain Rourke never sought recognition. Neither did Solano or Ven or any of the crew. They had done what needed to be done, not for glory, not for power, but because someone had to, and someone always would. As Earth looked toward the stars once more, not with fear, but with possibility, the words spoken upon Arkwright as return echoed across every broadcast, every classroom, every rebuilt city. Earth sent one ship to a war. Turned out that was all it took.